Okay, so let's talk about insulin, shall we? When we eat a meal that contains carbohydrates, our blood sugars begin to increase. And since blood sugar cannot get into our cells directly, it needs insulin. The pancreas senses the rise in blood sugar and releases insulin in response. And the insulin then binds to cells, signaling them to absorb the sugar from the bloodstream. Insulin is also referred to as the key that unblocks the cells to allow sugar to enter and be used for energy. And if you have more sugar than your body needs, insulin helps store it in the liver or muscle in the form of glycogen. This way, when your blood sugar levels become low, you will have extra stores in your liver that can be released back into your bloodstream for later use. The role of insulin is to regulate blood sugar levels and keep them at a normal range. And every time blood sugar rises, your pancreas will secrete more insulin. The problem with that arises when insulin becomes chronically elevated in the body. Insulin happens to be the main fat storage hormone in the body, and it tells fat cells to store fat and prevents stored fat from being broken down into energy. So think about it this way. Insulin can only be present in the body if we have elevated blood sugars. We can only have elevated blood sugar if we've recently consumed a meal. Therefore, if we are on an energy surplus from recently consuming a meal, insulin gets released to store up this available energy. And the last thing our body will want to do is break down its energy stores in the form of fat for energy, because we already have energy. So when people are obese or are chronically eating a diet filled with processed foods and fast-burning carbohydrates, insulin is constantly being released by the pancreas. And eventually, our cells stop responding to that increase. In other words, the cells become so resistant or numb to the increase in insulin. And when that happens, the insulin still just does its job by detecting more and more increases of blood sugar, and then it releases more and more insulin into the bloodstream to bring the blood sugar levels back down. And the problem with that is that the insulin receptors in cells do not respond and are not sensitive to the rise in insulin any longer. They become what we call insulin resistant. And the end result is chronically high amounts of insulin in the bloodstream and chronically elevated blood sugars as well. Do you think a person under those circumstances would be able to use their fat stores? Not a chance. Nope, not going to happen. They are in constant energy surplus mode, and the chronically elevated insulin levels in their body will never allow the breakdown of fat stores, resulting in that person becoming more and more obese. This also leads to a chronic release of stress hormones, putting our body in a chronic stress response. These hormones increase heart rate, cardiac output, and blood pressure. It also causes the hippocampus of the brain to shrink and decreases our ability to sleep. Insomnia, anybody? You'll get intention headache, you'll have decreased sex drive, you'll get low levels of growth hormone, and continue to crave sugars and unhealthy fats. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, the Journal of Applied Physiology, and the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry, they all state that a significant reduction in insulin resistance happens with intermittent fasting. And by stopping the development of insulin resistance through intermittent fasting, it will prevent every other chronic disease out there, especially metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. In fact, people who are insulin resistant have a 93% greater risk of developing heart disease, the leading cause of death in the whole world. Intermittent fasting gives our body a break from eating throughout the day, turning our body from an energy surplus machine into an energy deficit machine. So when we take a break from constantly feeding our body, our blood sugars begin to normalize. And when we don't have an increase in blood sugars, we will not release insulin. Now, since insulin prevents fat stores from being burned, we will finally give our body a chance to actually burn stored fat around that midsection muffin top. And we'll start to build up our insulin sensitivity again. Yay! That's amazing. So when we build up our insulin sensitivity, we'll begin to prevent every single chronic disease out there, reducing our chance of heart disease by, 93%. That's pretty darn good.